But that being said, a couple things that I can comment on. Section 1031 has been around since 1920. It's not a new thing. It's not something that a president 15 years ago put into play. It's been there forever. So it's got a history to it of performance. And the tax code, you kind of want to think about not so much as the way the government gets your money, although they're very effective at that, but it is an incentive, a behavior incentivizer. And if you perform the behaviors that the tax code wants you to do, then you will be rewarded. And that's the 1031 exchange. So what is it that they want rewarded? We desperately need an active real estate market to keep the economy chugging along. We need something to take dollars off the street, and we need something to provide employment. And so, yes, there are people that come on, and every year it seems this current administration puts it in their budget. We're either going to get rid of 1031, we're going to cap it at $1 million a year, or something. And it's out there this year.
You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we're all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, Chad, the Investment Maverick.
All right, Real Estate Runway family. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. I'm your host, Chad Sutton. Great to have you back today. I am so excited for this discussion. As you know, many of you who have worked with us before know we are very 1031 friendly and we're passionate about the topic. I happen to have with me today Mr. Dave Foster, the founder of the 1031 Investor and 1031 Expert. You know, at least he may not claim to be, but we believe he is today. So we're glad to have him on. And we're going to get into a little bit of practical knowledge about, you know, how does a 1031 work? What's changing with it, if anything? And how might we use it to transition to passive investing from active investing? So Dave, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on this morning. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Chad. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Loving that shirt too. If you guys are on video, we got a pretty cool looking, are they oil wells on there? What is that?
No, those are lobsters, man. I lived in Key West for a bunch of years and many seasons coming up.
Very good. Very good. Well, Dave, as is customary on the show, before we get going here, I'd love to hear, just for the audience's sake, a little more about you, how you came to be in this space, and a little bit of your journey to get you to today before we talk about what's on our heart today, which is the 1031 exchange. So tell us about yourself.
Love to tell our story because it really fits in well with where my passion is with the 1031 exchange. I am a degreed accountant, which means I should be and am one of the biggest nerds you've ever met, who sleeps with spreadsheets all around the room. But I'm also an ADD-inflicted serial real estate investor. Somehow I never met a piece of real estate I didn't fall in love with and want to change and want to use to make money. So it's some people have said I've got the mind of an accountant, but the heart of a marketer and real estate investor. So that was really how we got started. And this goes all the way back, Chad, almost 30 years, when we were trying, the Minneapolis city girl, the Kansas farm boy, living in Colorado, decided they wanted to buy a sailboat and sail away. Where did that come from? We don't have a clue. But we set that goal, and someone decided that real estate investing was going to be the quickest way to get there. So Ready, Fire, Aim Dave bought a duplex in Denver, fixed it up, put a renter in it, then sold it, and I thought we were on our way. Till my accountant reminded me that we have a silent partner named Uncle Sam. And Uncle Sam was going to take $30,000 from me that year. Well, I'm sorry, but that sucks. That was just horrible. And it still haunts me to this day. Because if I would have that $30,000 to use for myself for 30 years, what would that have grown into? with compound interest. Over $1 million that I left on the table in my very first real estate transaction. So I don't always learn from my mistakes, but I try to. And it's not the making the mistake that kills you, it's repeating it that does. So that was when we
Amen.
discovered 1031 exchanges, which, as you know, allow you to sell investment real estate, purchase new investment real estate, and as part of that, you get to use the deferred tax on the profit. So that money starts to work for you. And as long as you keep it deferred, you get to keep it going. And that's the beauty of the 1031 exchange. So we went from worrying that we were ever going to make our goal to 10 years later, moving our portfolio from Denver to Connecticut to Florida, ending up buying a 53-foot sailboat with tax-free dollars. There's another story there. And sailing away, raising our 4 children on a sailboat while we lived off of the income from our rental portfolio of vacation rentals. So we achieved the goal. And along the way, I said, my gosh, this is so powerful for me. We got to do this for others. And so that's when we started the 1031 company.
That is incredible. Setting sights on a go. So I always talk about in the mindset and planning perspective. If you don't know where you're going, right? Think about a cruise ship. If that cruise ship doesn't know where it's going, it could be 1 or 2 degrees off and wind up in London, or it could wind up in Africa, right? So knowing where you were going, which pun intended, it was to get to a ship to sail away. It led you to figure out how in the world you're going to do this. And so as I mentioned to you before, the listeners of this show, Dave, are, they're mostly passive investors or active investors in real estate of some kind looking to become passive. And some of them are operators of larger real estate syndications or just larger investors themselves. So let's take it from the most basic groundwork we need to have, because people I think they're aware of the 1031 exchange, but many don't really fully understand it and the requirements of it. So when I say, what do I need to know as an investor about the strategy at baseline? Let's start there. Let's not assume any knowledge, right?
Right. So let's first start out with the impact, which we've sort of mentioned, but it deserves to be reiterated. And that is that the 1031 exchange allows you to indefinitely defer paying the tax that you normally would on capital gain and the recapture of depreciation. I say indefinitely because it literally, you can keep that going all your life. Now, compound interest is wonderful and it works, whether it's reinvesting of dividends or whether it's getting interest off of income or whether it's getting income off the deferred tax. And then the income off the income you got off the deferred tax. But whether you keep that compounding going for 2 years or 30 years, the money benefits you. And that's what's so huge about it, is it will allow you to geometrically compound your portfolio as you go through life, because the government is letting you use their money for your benefit. So I can't emphasize that enough. That's the power. Now, what does it look like for an investor? That's the amazing thing. You don't change your behavior at all. We have so many people, I call them the accidental investor, right? We're all starting to get married a little bit later in life when we've got careers established. Maybe both of us have a house. And when we get married, by the way, Chad, you're always going to move into her house because it's the one that's clean. So you got to keep that in mind.
Right.
But what does my house
and decorated and all the things?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's got 2 forks instead of 1. So your house becomes an investment property. Voila. You're now on your journey. And a few years later, you've kind of gotten addicted to that income. So you say, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we sold this property because I'd like to buy something else in a different spot, or I'd like to go buy 2 properties to take advantage of my trapped equity. And so the 1031 exchange allows you to sell that property, and instead of paying tax on the profit, you go buy 2 new properties. and now you're making twice as much revenue. And that just grows and goes throughout your life. So the 1031 exchange defers it indefinitely. It allows you to react to wherever the market is, because all you're doing is selling and then buying real estate. It's very seamless. It's very transparent. It's in the middle of those closings that the devil's in the details.
So I don't want to take anything for granted here, folks. He mentioned a term, trapped equity, right? And I think what a lot of newer investors may not realize is you may let's say you and your to use this example, you and your future spouse both bought a house 10 years ago, right? And you happen to buy it in Nashville, Tennessee, because I know that market. I love it, Music City. And if anyone who reads the news has heard about Nashville, Tennessee, you know that it has exploded over the last 10 years. It is an incredible rental or real estate market, rental market as well. And so you may have bought those houses to live in, and now 10 years later, you are getting married and moving into her house because we've already established it's clean and you're a pig, right? If you're a guy. And so you sell that house. Well, you wouldn't be surprised, like that trapped equity. If you were just living there, let's say you bought it for $100,000. You didn't, but let's say you did. You had a $50,000 loan on it and you're paying that mortgage, right? Well, that house is probably now worth $300,000, right? So the thought is, if I put my investor hat on, maybe I sell that house that I no longer need for $300,000. And now I could go to a different market where rents and values are more in line with each other, and I could buy three $100,000 houses and get the same rental revenue on each one. What did I just do there, right? And so what he's telling us is now we can do that without paying tax, because if you pay tax on that $300,000, what's 40% off of that? I mean, now you're at like $180,000. Oh my gosh, that now you can buy 1.8 houses. That's not enough, So you see the power,
right? Cut your buying power by a third.
Yeah, exactly. So okay. So let's talk a little bit about the process. So let's say I sell this house. I'm moving in with my spouse because I'm an accidental investor, and okay, I sell the house. What like we're under contract to sell. What do I do to do a 1031 exchange? How does it start?
So one of the key is that the IRS does not let you DIY it. You have to use the services of an unrelated third party called the qualified intermediary. And they're sort of like going to be your guide as you go through it. And it's their responsibility to document the exchange at the closing of the sale. They have to hold your proceeds in trust while you're shopping for your new property. And you only have 45 days from the date of the closing of your sale to find your replacement property. So it's a fairly constrained time frame. You've got 180 days to close on it. But that 45-day shopping period can be pretty tight. And then you get under contract, you purchase the new property, the QI brings the funds in and documents the closing there. And that is the 1031 exchange. What did you do differently? Well, you probably sped up your shopping process because you were a little more dedicated and devoted to making that happen. And you signed a few more papers. And that's it. Your accountant is going to file a form, the 8824, on your tax return that fall, and bingo, you're off to the races. So you're doing exactly what you talked about, Chad. You're now selling real estate, buying different types of real estate, buying different numbers of real estate, buying in different locations. All of that's fine with the 1031 exchange, as long as it's investment real estate. And then you use the QI and you adhere to those timeframes.
Yeah. And talking about, so speaking from experience, right? I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. You mentioned that 45-day period goes pretty quick, right? So it would be a wise idea for one to probably, as they're considering selling said property, and probably before you even pick a buyer and go under contract with that property, you should already be thinking about, where do I want to buy that replacement property or the new asset? How big does it need to be? How many do I want? And you should already be looking at them, right? Because if you say, okay, well, sold the property, let me just go on vacation for a week and I'll come back and then we'll start looking. You're going to be surprised how fast that 45th day shows up. And Dave, do they make exceptions for anybody on that 45 days, or is it?
They do not. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I mean, if you're in a hurricane or a wildfire, you might. But I kind of laugh because it's like, that might be a nice thing to hope for. And then I stop and I go, no, it's not. So don't hope for it and just use it if it comes. But no, you're not. So yeah, it's very serious how the IRS treats that. Now, what I like to tell people, Chad, is take a look at the market, understand where you're at, and then do the hard thing first. Get it out of the way. Are we in an extreme seller's market? Then go find your new property first. You can actually be under contract for your new property before your old property closes. You just can't take title to it till after you sell your old property. So go get that new property under contract. Use contingencies, offer additional earnest money, maybe get a lease option to buy that property. But if that's the hard thing to do, get that done. Then put your old property up for sale. Shoot, we had people in California 6 years ago that would spend months trying to find a replacement property. And they would actually give, like in some cases, 40, 50, 60% earnest money, non-refundable. And then they would turn around the day they got that contract, they put their old property up for sale, and they'd get 50 offers day one at 150% of ask. It was that kind of crazy market. Well, how can you go find your old property when it's that kind of a seller's market? But the same thing is true also if it's a buyer's market. Get your old property up for sale. And as soon as you get a contract for it, then go and pick out your replacement property. So the easy part, you do second.
That makes a lot of sense, Dave. And so, like you said, do the hard thing first. Don't put it off, because I mean, the worst thing that happens, folks, is you do it. You start a 1031 exchange, you don't hit the deadline, and you're right back where you were in the beginning. You got to pay tax anyway, so you don't want to waste the exchange. But am I correct in saying that someone like you or the qualified intermediary is going to be able to kind of help, like before you ever engage into like, hey, I'm going to sell this property and I'm marketing it and all that. Like, when is the right time to engage the QIs? Because I mean, I guess you guys can help with strategy and things of that sort, before you ever enter the contract, or should one always wait until they're in contract to sell to engage someone like you?
That's a great question. Not every QI is the same. And there are a lot of them that really see their business model as being the processing of the 1031 exchange. And that's okay, because that's exactly what the law says. But what I've seen in evolvement in our model, and I've really enjoyed it, is that we've gone from that panic, I'm closing in 2 days, can you make the 1031 work? Because I just found out about it. To now people start calling and saying, I'm thinking to sell a property next year. Here's the details on it. Is it going to be worth my while? What should we start planning for? Or I'm wanting to pivot into this type of investing. How can the 1031 work with that? Those become strategic questions where the longer runway you have, the better decision you're going to be able to make. So I would say go find a QI that likes to talk to you, that wants to work you through that stuff and not just process the paperwork. And because it'll be very, very valuable for you. Because the 1031 investing, by and large, you really want to look at as a lifelong occupation. Because again, the longer you're able to keep the tax deferred, the more the money's in your pocket. It's going to accommodate wherever the market is, so you can listen to the market, go from San Francisco to Austin, go from single family to large multifamily. It also works, though, wherever you're at in your personal life cycle. And this is what a lot of people don't understand, is I'm not the same investor I was today that I was yesterday. And I'm not the same investor I'll be next week. We change, right? When we're young, we got more energy than money. As we start to age, some of you got more brains. I just got more money. That's all. But our needs and our abilities change. And at some point in time, when family starts, we might want to move our portfolios from simply single family rentals into maybe vacation rentals, where we can still make revenue, but also start to provide memories for our family. And in a topic that I know is very close to your heart, as we start to get older, we start to look at not wanting to be quite so active. How can I use the 1031 exchange to go from active to passive so that I'm gearing up to retire in a very productive way, not being a slave to toilets and tenants? The 1031 exchange accommodates all of that. And that's the most beautiful thing about it.
I love that it's a strategy that can grow with you. It's timeless. And I really want to come back to, some of the transitioning phases in life. But before I do, two additional questions on kind of the mechanics here. One, we mentioned we can defer these gains in perpetuity for the rest of your life. Well, many of us are doing this to create generational wealth, pass things on to our children and things of that sort. What happens when your life ends and you still own these assets and you've 1031 exchanged them your whole life? Where does it go from there? What happens?
Yeah. The second greatest strategy for 1031 exchange. And I say the second greatest because nobody wants to die. What was it Bob Marley said? Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to die. So, but we're all heading there. When you pass away owning real estate, that real estate goes to your heirs at what is called a stepped up basis. In other words, all of that deferred tax, all of that depreciation that you've taken over the years disappears, and your heirs get the property tax-free. You want to talk about a generational legacy build right there. That's just huge. You don't pay the tax as long as you live. Your estate doesn't pay the tax when you die, and your heirs don't pay the tax when they get the property. The only bad thing in that scenario, you're not around to enjoy it.
That's what I was hoping you'd say. I was hoping that hadn't changed. But yeah, that's so powerful. You defer these gains, and beware, guys. You defer these gains for 30 years and then decide to sell it, you're going to get hit with every bit of tax you deferred since the first one. But if you keep it going like you should till the end and you focus on living on the cash flow and increasing that cash flow line item, then eventually you pass it on and all of your tax deferment goes away. It's a beautiful thing. And so that leads me to the second question before I want to get to some of the transitioning to more of a passive investor strategies. So Dave, we've all read the news. We've heard different news stories and podcasts talking about, is the 1031 exchange going away? Is it changing? I'd just love to, from a pro in the industry, has anything materially changed? Do we see anything materially changing, in the legal structure of the tax code related to this? What are your thoughts on that? And it's purely speculative. I get it. This can't be considered as future guarantee, but.
Well, I think it was Gideon Tucker, who was a constitutional attorney, I think, a bunch of years ago, who just said, nobody's person, property, or liberties are safe as long as Congress is in session. So, yeah, you kind of got to never say never with these yahoos. But that being said, a couple things that I can comment on. Section 1031 has been around since 1920. It's not a new thing. It's not something that a president 15 years ago put into play. It's been there forever. So it's got a history to it of performance. And the tax code, you kind of want to think about not so much as the way the government gets your money, although they're very effective at that, but it is an incentive, a behavior incentivizer. And if you perform the behaviors that the tax code wants you to do, then you will be rewarded. And that's the 1031 exchange. So what is it that they want rewarded? We desperately need an active real estate market to keep the economy chugging along. We need something to take dollars off the street, and we need something to provide employment. And so, yes, there are people that come along, and every year it seems this current administration puts it in their budget. We're either going to get rid of 1031, we're going to cap it at $1 million a year or something. And it's out there this year. But every year there are these huge studies that are put together that show that. Two things. First of all, the average price of a 1031 exchange, this will surprise you. It's not the $5 million Hilton and Trump kind of stuff. The average price of a 1031 exchange, about $400,000. So this is not the fat cats that we're going after. You're going after Main Street America. And I don't know about you, but I kind of like to keep that. But the other thing that the studies all show is that if you do away with 1031 exchanges, yes, you will generate more tax dollars from capital gains tax. That's a cheaper tax. But what you will lose, because if someone like me, if I have to pay the tax, I'm going to find a different way. I'm not going to sell that property. So I'm not going to buy somebody else's property, and somebody who's coming up after me isn't going to get to buy my property. So we're going to stagnate the real estate industry. And when that happens, what do we lose? We lose 2 realtor commissions, 2 title company fees, 2 real estate attorney reviews, 2 painters, 2 appraisers, 2 processors, and all of them are paying ordinary income tax and feeding their families off of that money. So once everybody kind of sits down and looks at it, they go, okay, we should not mess with that. And indeed, every president I've been under for 25 years has talked about getting away with it at one time or another. They all decide no. So I'm not overly concerned. What I am concerned with is that there is a proposal to get rid of the step-up basis. And that concerns me because that's the final strategy, all right? That's what lets us put the last piece of the puzzle to play for our heirs. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's being floated around out there.
Yeah, and just to stack on that, like this is not a political conversation. This is, I love that you based it on facts, right? And the facts are the numbers don't lie. One person's spending is another person's income. And if you take away a major transaction that has a ripple effect, well, look what you just did to GDP. I mean, you can literally point to that. And so it's an easy big bucket of tax dollars to look at and say, oh, I'm going to capitalize on that. And then you realize why nobody else in 25 years has capitalized on that. So, but the other thing is, and look, but before I ever got into real estate, folks, I was looking at like, how do people make money in this country, right? And person after person, politician after politician, businessman after businessman, everybody owns real estate in some capacity. Whether you start that way, make your money that way, or you buy it with the money you made doing something else, like starting PayPal, right? Everybody's got real estate. Elon Musk has real estate. And so the interesting thing is, when you look at the number of people who are in Congress, for example, making the laws that we're talking about, debating over things, you look at the members who go through the executive branch, most of them come from families who own some form of real estate and leverage this thing. Now I love hearing speeches from politicians saying how they're going to go fight for the little guy and we're going to help you with this, but never in my, now I'm younger, so maybe Dave can attest to this differently, but never in my 36 years of existence. He's got more wisdom on him there, but never in my 36 years of existence have I seen a politician dig into their own pocket, for the greater good. So that just for what that's worth, I don't think it's going anywhere either. Anything to add to that? Or I think we kind of beat that dead horse pretty good.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's something that's out there. I think it was 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago, the first year of this administration, they first put the proposal out to get rid of 1031. And the United States Senate, so you know how it works, right? The Congress prepares the budget, Senate has to ratify it, they all have to come together. Which, by the way, I think the best thing we could probably have is let's have one party in control of one and the other party in control of the other. They'll never get anything done. It's beautiful. And we get to just continue what we do. But the Senate voted unanimously, that's Democrat, Republican alike, to say no change to 1031. At the bottom line, they know what it is. And I think that really what happens now is they will throw a proposal out, not because they really want it, because they want to have something to give away. So we're going to throw this out, shock everybody. You fight back. We pretend to give it to you. And now it's business as usual in Washington. I think we're okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, very good. Thank you for hitting that one with me. So now let's kind of round out the episode, folks, with some strategies on what I think a lot of you may be thinking about is, okay, well, I've been doing 1031. Let's say you're the person who's been doing 1031s for 20, 30 years. You have been the active operator. And as Dave mentioned, you've accumulated some money, you've accumulated some smarts, and you're like, I really think I'd like to invest in another operator or another, group investment or something like that, and maybe not be the full active player. So, how might I, as that individual, start to leverage this strategy to maybe move to more passive of a direction? What's available? What I need to be thinking about? Let's go there, Dave.
Yeah. So in general, you have to understand that the 1031 exchange is a sale of actual real estate followed by a purchase of actual real estate. So as I'm going along in my life and I decide, hey, I want to start investing in syndications, generally I'm not going to be able to because I might be selling real estate, but what I'm buying is a membership interest in the limited partnership that owns the real estate. So I'm not buying the actual real estate. So that's kind of the non-starter right there. So I could pay the tax and then invest, but now I'm giving up all that compounding, right? And I've worked this long to keep it, so I don't really want to do that. But that is an option. And some people will move that way. What I try to give people opportunities to do is to start to separate and view the syndication, although you're getting all the benefits of real estate ownership, view that more as an equities investment. And you're going to pay the tax when it sells, and then you're going to buy another one. That's okay, but you're keeping your real estate deferred tax going. But option one is sell it, pay the tax, go invest in syndications. Another option that's available is if the syndication, and for some of your senior operators, this could be a great thing. If you could spin off part of your property to sell to the 1031 investor as a tenant in common, then they're going to sell their property, do a 1031 exchange, and they're going to buy part of the property you're doing the syndication in. So you actually have two owners of the real estate now, but they fall under your operating agreement and it operates just as normal. When that is sold, guess what they can do? Because they own actual real estate, you can sell that whole property. They can take their percentage and do another 1031 exchange, maybe into your next deal. See how nifty that can work if you can accept tenants in common.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And just to be clear, folks, a tenant in common interest is considered real property. You just said, we talked about this in the beginning. You have to exchange real property or real estate for, the tax word is real property for real property. Real property for personal property doesn't work. Membership interest in an LLC are personal property, right? Most of the time. There's ways you can change that, but that's an advanced course in this that we won't get into today unless we have time. But the and I guess there are, I want to ask this question in the right way. Let's say, Dave, I'm looking at an operator that I like, and I'm like, maybe I want to go invest X amount, and I approach them about a 1031 exchange and how they could do it. What words do I need to hear back from them to know that they're competent enough in this and not going to screw up my 1031 exchange? Because I have seen it. I'm sure you have too. People say, yeah, we're going to do a tenant in common. And then they do it. And then they, negate everything they did because the lender told them to or something. And it doesn't really hold. Right. So are there certain situations where maybe you can't just say, yeah, we're going to do a tenant in common and it's great. How do we make sure it's kosher, right? I guess is the right term.
Yeah, the key is in the deed. If you're getting a tenant in common interest, your name goes on the deed. It may be for 1%, it may be for 10%. But that's what you've got to look for. If there's no, and the QI has to monitor that. We cannot send money out to buy something if there's no deed. So that's really the protection that's right there. So they can say, yeah, it's a tenant in common interest. You say, let me see my proposed deed. and that's how you'll know.
Perfect.
Now,
At the end of
there
the
is
day, you are
another thing
buying
that
part of that
operators,
property. Yeah.
exactly. Now, I was just going to say another challenge to your senior operators, and we're just now starting to see this working through the market, and that is that we're seeing syndication wide 1031 exchanges. So I bought a property for 3 or 4 million. We're selling it for 6. But I'm going to take that 6 million, and as the syndication, as a limited partnership, we're going to 1031 that sale into 2 $3 million value add propositions. Whoa, what just happened? I took a finished product, sold it for 2 that are ready for value add. We're doing a 1031 exchange, so all of my investors come along with me if they want. So I just cut my fundraising by a fraction of what it would have had to have been. And if there are investors in your limited partnership that don't want to go along with a 1031 exchange, you can simply take small amounts of money out of the sale to buy them out of their interest. Or other investors who want to go along could buy their interests out. The key there, Chad, is that any tax-paying entity can do a 1031 exchange. If you own real estate, you can do a 1031. If a limited partnership owns real estate, it can sell and do a 1031. All of the members go along with it. So that, I think, is a great opportunity that's still relatively untapped. Keep your investors together, keep moving forward.
And that's the difference, folks. Really, your imagination is and tax law is the limit on how well you can use this here. And operators like us, we are very well involved in this strategy. We have a couple of strategies we're not even going to get into here because it's an advanced course in 1031 and tax law. But just know that if an operator cringes a little bit when you ask them about a 1031 exchange to do a syndication, you may not want to be their first one, right? But there are some operators out there who have done this time and time again. They have the right legal teams in place, the right process, and it can be a really good thing, right? And Dave mentioned just a couple of the possibilities to make it work. So, and then of course, before we let Dave go, we got a couple of questions we want to ask you to get to know you a little bit better. You ready?
All right, let's go.
Let's do it. So, Dave, what is your superpower, life or business, and how does it serve you well?
My superpower, I think my family and friends would say it's kindness. Kindness is when you are willing to look for others' interests and it doesn't benefit you. And that served me really well in business because we did well ourselves. And now we are able to give back. And that's kindness. And I think there's kind of there's just not enough kindness in the world right now, is there? We're pretty angry people.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. It sounds a lot like the Go Giver book would resonate with you. Have you ever read that one?
I haven't, but I'm writing it down. The Go Giver.
Yeah, that'll jive with you. It talks about, it's an abundance type of book, but everyone should read that book. It is a wonderful way to get into the abundance mindset, and it talks about kindness and all sorts of stuff. So great book. You'll love it. Let's flip that coin over though. So what is your biggest failure, life or business? And most importantly, what did you take away from it?
My biggest failings are on both sides of the same coin. I've been too aggressive because I got that touch of ADHD, and I, once in a while, will get the deal that I shouldn't have. Right? It's not the deal you don't get that kills you. It's the one you got that you shouldn't have. And so Ready, Fire, Aim Dave has a propensity for doing that. But the other side of that coin then is that I'm very tenacious. And all you got to do to wave a red flag in front of me is give me a problem deal. And we'll kill ourselves trying to make that thing happen. So moving too fast, but then being tenacious to solve them.
I love that. That's one way to take a mistake and turn it into a good thing, right? The tenacity to solve the problem. But yeah, I love that. So, okay, next question. We at Quattro are really big on giving back, generosity, philanthropy, all the things. It's one of our 4 pillars, after all: people, property, profits, and philanthropy, coming back and taking care of people. So I love to give my guests a chance to just kind of talk about your giving heart, time, talents, treasures. Where do you like to give back in the world? And sometimes our members, our guests, will actually go give on your behalf to said cause. So what is that for you?
And that's awesome. For a long, long time, I've been married now for 34 years, so a really long time. My wife and I have made a practice of, because we are believing Christians, we tithe to our church. But living in the world of real estate, you know full well, right? It's unpredictable. So what we did is we set a benchmark for our tithing, and then we simply put what the tithe really is into a bank account. And for decades then, we just live life. And occasionally something comes up. Hey, I'd like to give to this group. I'd like to give to that group. Or in some cases, God's put it on our hearts to give to the same group at the same time. So we have invested and given to the orphanage where our son came from Haiti. We've given to Blessed Hope Ministries in Kenya, who are taking care of 700 orphans, where they just pull them off the street. Mully Incorporated, same thing, feeding the country of Kenya, all so that these children can have hope in their lives. But that seems so big sometimes, Chad, that we forget that young couple down the street that just had their first baby and are exhausted could use a meal or a date night. My wife's the baby whisperer, so we're always looking for opportunities for people to offload their kids so we can babysit so they can go have a date night. Giving can look 1,000 different ways and yet really bless people. It's not the money, it's the thought that's going in behind it and what it's giving that person. So I don't know, that's some of the things that we've done.
I love your heart there. And like we said, it's time, it's talents, and treasures, right? Treasures is money. You could be giving of treasures, but maybe it's the talent of being the baby whisperer, which enables someone else to go get a date night. I mean, it's an amazing thing. So another, just given the conversation here, I'll throw this out because this book's been on my heart. It's called God and Money by John Cortines. It was an incredible read. And I'm just throwing this out for the listeners as well. I've just finished it up, but I've been on this giving journey as well. And it's kind of changing the mindset, as you achieve and more becomes available, you want to let your heart change from how much do I need to give to how much do I need to keep. Right. And it's amazing what happens when you start thinking of it that way. And then anyway, so that's I could do a whole podcast on just that, but we'll keep it going. But last question, Dave. Folks, pay attention here because if I have someone on the podcast, it means I've looked into them and I believe that they are someone who can help you. So what is the best way for our listeners who may be thinking about 1031 exchange or just want to talk to a friendly face who understands this strategy? How can we get in touch with you and your company and anything else you want us to know about the company before we close the episode?
Yeah, strategy is really where it's all about. And the best strategies are cooked slow. So the best thing you can do is we've set up our entire company with that philosophy in mind. The1031investor.com. There's a YouTube channel with, I think like now we're at 60 different short videos, how to use 1031 exchanges. You go to youtube.com/1031investor or just access it through our website. Calculators to help you determine if a 1031 is going to be right for you. The opportunity to talk to us directly because we can just sit and brainstorm with you. And I've written a book, which I think you've got a copy or it's on its way to you, called Lifetime
It is.
Tax
Thank you for
Wealth.
that.
The Real Estate Investor's Guide to the 1031 Exchange. The thing that I like best about that book, Chad, is it's not just the how-to. We actually devoted a chunk of the book to case studies, how actual people actually use these to change their lives and set themselves up for success. And, we're all not unique. We're all very similar creatures. So while what works for you might not work exactly for me, a lot of what works for you will work for me. and it's in studying those people and those situations. So the 1031investor.com. Come by and say hi.
Check it out. And folks, as usual, if you are driving, scroll down in the show notes later, and that will be there for your clicking pleasure. Thanks to our wonderful editor, Mr. Kyle. And Dave, thank you for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. It was some great information. I almost called you John after the author of the book we just talked about. And I hope I may have you back on, if you don't mind, for kind of an advanced course in this stuff. I mean, we laid the groundwork. We talked about the strategy. Maybe we'll come back and do an advanced course in this in a few weeks.
There's a lot we did not go through that we could have with syndications, for sure.
All right, everyone. This has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. Until next time, over and out. By the way, if you got any value out of this, like, subscribe, share, pass it along. We do this for you. We don't make money on this. This is just for you. So the more people you share it with, the more you interact with it, the more people like you will see it. Until next time, bye for now.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com and scroll down for more info. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway Podcast.